It looks like we're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. We've got Clive Thompson as usual, but we also got Francis Hunt, the market sniper. Some of you have been asking to get him on. He's been on before, of course. And the title today is JPMorgan Chief Jamie Dimon, that is, warns of bond market crack and panic, but says we'll be fine. And we'll be fine. By will be fine, he means JP Morgan will be fine, as usual. But yeah, we're going to cover that. We're going to try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Yeah. And you probably noticed I'm wearing a Maneko 64 hat. It says get stacked. You can see Rudy there. He's on the sofa, but there's also a Rudy cushion and a Rudy shopping bag. Um, yes, this is the new Rudy collection. It was one of the viewers, Karen, who had the idea. The website is going to be ready very soon, and I will let you guys know when you can go there to buy some Rudy collection merchandise. I used to have the Teespring store, but I stopped that because the quality was so bad. So I have to thank Karen for the idea, and she sent me samples because I wanted to make sure that the quality was good, and it is. Uh, there's also a Maneko 64 mug. It's a really nice big mug. So, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. And guess who's on the other side with his gold stash? It's Rudy. So, there you go. Nice to see all of you here. Quadman 72 is here. Spock 2024. Yeah, the pillow is really nice. My wife was sitting there the other day and she said it's really comfortable. David stops. Been away for a couple of weeks. Good to be back, he says. Scott Lynn, hi everyone, coming from Round Rock, Texas today. John Smith, give gold. Mark Sneed, hi Mario, Rudy. Snackers should be a great show. Let's hope so. Jingles for Jesus. Matthew 4:17. From that time on, Jesus began to preach, repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. Uh, Charles Schulten, a doggy bag. Yeah, that's a good one. It's quite big. It's nice. Haugingling from Scandinavia. John Harland, boa noite de Fundão, Portugal. All right, Portugal. Catfish Customs. Hello, Mara, my friend and monetary educator from across the pond. Love Rudy. Miss weekend at Billy's. Yeah, well, we all miss Billy. Uh, Red pill on steroids. Thank you for the super chat. Hi, Mario. How long does the UK have before we collapse under immigration, housing shortages, national insurance increases, stagnant wages? Well, that's a good question. They're trying to somehow keep it going. But I think over here also asked about capital controls, and it's weird because I've been looking at capital controls. One of my good friends, uh, who's actually based in the Bahamas, but he's originally from the UK and he's here right now. He thinks we're going to have capital controls in the UK, and that would be really a lot desperate thing, and I'm going to cover that. But how long? It's always difficult to say. I think the most important thing, Red Pill, is that we know that it will happen. So we can never predict the exact day, but we can take the right course of action to prepare for it. Um, some people are just packing up and leaving, but those people have a lot more resources than most of us. They can move anywhere they want. Uh, I mean, I'm trying to do the best I can for my family and myself, and for you guys, for the community. Yeah, that's what I try to do. Someone asked me the other day, why do you keep giving people this information? Well, because I think it's good information, and why should I keep it secret? If it's good information and good thinking, why shouldn't I make it public to try to help those who want to help themselves? That's the way I see things. UK forcing pensions to invest in riskier markets. Yeah, they are. DZ015. I spoke about that last week. Um, they want to tap into the defined benefit pensions so-called surplus, which is really not a surplus. It's all hypothetical. And they also want to lower the amount that people can put in cash ISAs because they want people to invest in riskier uh, assets like stocks and bonds. So they're going to keep the 20,000 limit for the stock ISAs, but not for cash. And I think that's a bad thing. It shows they're desperate. Dutch libertarian, a city life is not the best place for safety. That's right, but not all of us can go and live in the countryside. Um, I think maybe being on the border where you can get to the countryside quickly might not be a bad thing. That's pretty much how I am. Over here, do you think that would be that you would be qualified to teach in higher institutions in economics? Um, I think I am, but I'm not the right kind of person for them because I wouldn't really want to follow their curricula. So that's the way I see it. Plus, why would I want to teach at an institution? uh, I'm fine doing what I do. I'm really happy being my own boss. Nashville Pasta Man, Morning Mario from Tennessee. So UK is the second largest holder of US Treasuries. Yeah, what could go wrong? That's right. Yeah, we should be adding gold, not US Treasuries. Yeah, we're going to talk about treasuries and the bond market because that Jamie Dimon talked about that. I saw that the Besant, the Secretary of the Treasuries, come out and said Jamie Dimon's wrong. But and he said that the U.S. will never default. Well, the U.S. technically right now is in default. It has been since August 15th, 1971, and the U.S. defaulted. Yeah, it's defaulted before in 1933. Yeah, under Roosevelt. JM from North Carolina says, hi, truth teller. My silver is about to leave the attic and go through the ceiling. Should I sell and buy more gold to lighten the impact? I always say that I try to buy both gold and silver. Yeah, I try to add both. But yeah. Barton Winchester. I'm a long time watch trader, mostly Rolex and Omega. Mailman from Richmond, Virginia. I had a good friend from that I actually knew in Switzerland. Uh, he was English, but his family was based in Richmond, which is interesting. Not Richmond, London, but Virginia. William, PMCD, please any comment on platinum? Thank you. Yeah, we can talk about that when Clive and they should be coming on soon. We can have a look at a chart. From what I've seen, platinum needs to break like 1200 to get really bullish. I personally don't have any platinum. I'm sticking to gold and silver. I guess there are probably some interesting mining companies that are involved in the platinum market. Silver Task, thank you for being a moderator and good evening. Michael Lamb, is the world set up for a reset on July 1st because of Basel III? No, I don't think so. Basel III is not something fixed in stone or written in stone. I think there's a lot more going on, more important things than Basel III, but I think it is affecting the gold market. More and more banks want to have physical gold because yeah, especially with the U.S. Treasuries not being AAA anymore. It's not rated by any of the three top rating agencies out there. And I guess I don't know if you guys have seen, there's big news. Some are calling it the Russia's Pearl Harbor. Ukraine is while they bombed with drones four different air bases in deep in Russia. And yeah, things are heating up, unfortunately, in that sense, in the war front. Peter Wilson, greetings, Mario, from Rollins College, Economics Club in Winter Park, where you were quite honored. Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I was looking at Winter Park the other day on Google Maps. I used to go play sometimes at Winter Park Golf Course. That's an interesting nine-hole course. One of the par five holes is a dog leg around the cemetery. And if you hit your ball into the cemetery, you couldn't go get the ball. It's out of bounds. I remember that. Andrew Watson, thank you for your super chat. If capital controls are introduced in the UK, do you think a limit on how much gold we can own? Yeah, not maybe not how much you can own, but how much you can buy. Let's hope. Or let me change here something here. We need a gallery, not just a speaker. Yeah, Andrew Watson. Yeah, anything's possible, but right now, capital controls is like something that would be last resort. It would happen after a major crisis. Would you say that, Clive? Capital controls?
Good evening, Mario. Well, we've had capital controls in m most of Europe at various points of time, including the UK. So, in a dire situation, um, uh, it's entirely possible they'll bring them back. And what does capital controls mean? It means you can't do what you want with your money when it comes to moving it abroad to perhaps take advantage of a cheaper opportunity abroad or go on holiday. You might remember, Mario, when you were young, if you left the UK on holiday, you had to have the back of your passport stamped with the amount of money you were taking out of the country. And I think in the early days, when I was very young, about 18, the limit was 50 quid.
Well, I wasn't here. I didn't grow up here, Clive, but my wife has told me about that. And even where I grew up in Brazil, there were capital controls as well. You couldn't really take a certain amount of money out. So the whole world has been under capital control. The other thing, so I've got the new hat.
What's that say? Get stacked, does it?
Yeah, yeah, and we've got some the Rudy mug. Uh,
Oh, how nice.
And it's going to be ready. It's ready, but the website is not running yet, but I'll let everyone know. And there's some Rudy cushions and stuff.
I think everybody's going to want, they're going to want your cap.
Yeah.
That's a really cool cap, Mario.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good quality as well. Uh, Someone made a comment here. Well, the other thing about capital controls, Clive, it's gonna really probably kill the city of London because why would you want to invest in this country if you can't take the money out?
Well, that's the situation. it's anti-business, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I saw one of your viewers just ask me
Yeah.
what the VAT rate on silver is in Switzerland. If you take delivery of your silver, it's 8.1%. That means if you go into a bank and buy some silver over the counter in the bank, or you go to a gold or silver dealer and buy it over the counter and walk away with it, it's 8.1%. If, on the other hand, you go into a bank and say, buy silver for me, but they're keeping it in account and it's not physically delivered to you, it's not put into your custody account, it's more of a liability of the bank, then there's no VAT.
Yeah. There's some comments here, some nice comments, and thank you. Phil Ward says, I followed you for many years and appreciate your daily videos. And then there's Apple Pie. I continue to learn from your broadcast. Thanks. But that said, we are on to you. Your identity as contrarian, but every broadcast, there's Rudy just sitting quietly. I figured it out. Yeah, apparently I'm keeping Rudy quiet because he's even more contrarian. But anyway, a joke. Uh, what else have we got? We should be getting Francis, but he's a little late. Uh,
He might be on at 8:30, 8:30, 9:30, Mario, because the invitation you sent out had the wrong time on it.
Actually, I changed it and then I sent it again, but
Okay.
it doesn't matter anyway. Uh, Andrew Rama, when the bond market back the central bank governments into the corner, at what point historically do they capitulate out of fear of rates rising too high? Well, recently it's been they don't wait too long. They just print, print, print. And they've been at it since 2008. The Japanese have been at it since the early 2000s. And prior to that, there was, I mean, in the 70s and early 80s there and the 90s, there wasn't any such thing as QE. Central banks hadn't become as profligate and reckless as they have been. Right, Clive?
That's right. Well, it's the 2008 financial crisis, the global financial crisis, which taught central banks, or at least they thought they'd learned a lesson, that they could print with impunity, because that's what they did. And it didn't seem to have any effect on inflation or anything else. And then along came the COVID crisis. So let's print again. And they did. But of course, these chickens are going to come home to roost sooner or later.
Yeah, let's print again like we did last summer. Well, Clive, the title of the live stream today is to do with Jamie Dimon. It's JPMorgan chief warns of bond market crack and panic, but says we'll be fine. And by will be fine, he means JPMorgan, the bank. They're prepared for it. But he says it could happen in 6 months or 6 years. And yeah, so your view on that? I mean, it's nothing new to us, right? But I think it's significant that the head of the biggest US bank is saying that.
I think he's right. I think it's disingenuous to say it might be 6 months or 6 years. He's kind of hedging his bet each way, so whichever way he's going to win. Of course, at some point before the 6 years is up, we're going to have quite a large crack in the bond market for the simple reason that the US government has to borrow vastly more money relative to its growth in GDP. And we've got this crunch coming in July or August when they raise the debt ceiling. So I think you'd be right, but I don't think I'd have given such a wide timescale. I would say most likely within the next year.
Mm. Forbidden Planet says JP Morgan deserves to be in prison for life. Well, that's the thing about corporations. You can't really put corporations in prison. I mean, I've got something here. Actually, I'll go and get it. Uh, I think this is from a few years ago. Uh, it's from the Solari report, and it's got all the fines that JP Morgan paid from 2002 to 2019. And I added it all up, Clive. They paid 43.7 billion pound dollars in fines, JP Morgan. So
Perhaps they just see it as a cost of doing business, Mario, as opposed
that's
to
right.
some
But
sort of punishment.
that's why corporations, they never go to prison because yeah, it's a legal entity. And in England, there's one bank, Clive. It's the oldest bank in England that is still family owned in the limited partnership, and it's called the Charles Hoare and Co. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, Horan Co. Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, so that bank is really fairly safe because if they have problems, the whole family loses everything. And I think that's how banks should be because one of their partners, he was brought in after the '08 crisis to talk about why his bank didn't fail. And he said that, well, because our bank is not a public corporation. So we have to make sure we do business in a responsible manner. And
And
but of course they're not going to listen to that. That would be the way to fix the banking system, not allow banks to become corporations.
in Switzerland we have this thing called private banks,
Yeah.
as opposed to banks which offer private banking services. So all banks offer private banking services, but private banks are banks which are not publicly owned. They're owned by the families in question. And the last bank I worked for was exactly one of those banks. And as you say, Mario, when it's the owner's own money which is at risk as
Mm.
opposed to someone else's money, i.e., the shareholders of the stock market, then the rules and the regulations are very, very strict to ensure that nobody, just nobody, gives the bank any sort of problem. Because the last thing in the world they want to do is pay a huge fine for something that someone's done wrong. Whereas if you're in a large publicly quoted company, there's hey, it's not the guy at the top of the pile. It's not his money. He doesn't have to care quite as much.
Yeah, so here we go. C. Hoare and Co., also known as Hoars, is a British private bank founded in 1672. So it's older than the Bank of England, the fourth oldest bank in the world, provides private banking. Yeah, so yeah, it's a limited partnership. And it says here, where is it? I think they're on in the 12th generation, so it's been family run since then. I think that's pretty impressive. But you have to have a lot of money to have an account with them. Isn't that so, Clive? I think.
I can't comment on Seahor, but if you want to bank or let's say have private banking services, and private banks only offer private banking services, you generally need to be pretty rich.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't comment too much on the UK banks because I
Yeah.
don't really know what their limits are.
Yeah.
But here in Switzerland, there are quite a few banks who are now saying they want at least 1 million or 3 million, or one or two now saying 5 or 10 million. So yeah, you need to be fairly wealthy to get into the bank. Of course, there are the odd bank here and there who have no minimum, and so if anyone needs to know which are the right banks to bank in, I can always help them. But I don't recommend the banks. I just happen to know which ones let you
Yeah.
in with no minimum, and which ones want 1 million or 5 million or 10 million. And you get what you pay for, of course. The more you put in the bank, the better the service, the better everything.
Golden Sun, thank you for your super chat. It says, "Hello, Mario, Clive, and Rudy from A2 Michigan." Big Bush Ape, thank you for your super chat. I went to Jersey for break. Very interesting place and very dodgy banking businesses. Yeah, I don't know much about Jersey. I just know that it's an offshore tax haven and it's in the Channel Islands, so it's nearer to France than it is to England, right, Clive?
Yes, it's almost on the coast of France.
Yeah.
But just to counter what he suggests, Jersey is a very highly regulated place, and whilst if you go back a certain number of years, you might find some nefarious activities. I think these days the the fear of going to prison by the employees is quite high. So I don't think there will be illegal activity going on in Jersey, just as there is in every country in the world. But I wouldn't highlight it as a place where money laundering or criminal activity is encouraged.
Yeah, so someone asked what's going on in Russia, so I brought this up. It happened, I think, this afternoon, or earlier today. Ukraine stages audacious attack on airfields deep in Russian territory. I heard someone calling it Russia's Pearl Harbor, and if it is Pearl Harbor, Russia's Pearl Harbor, that doesn't bode well for world peace, I guess. But yeah, they launched missiles deep into Russia, like here, Murmansk, I think is this region. They launched here. So I mean, Ukraine is here. So yeah, we're gonna have to see what happens now.
Yeah, I heard they'd smuggled or read that they'd smuggled lorries into Russia
Yeah,
with drones, and they could take these lorries deep inside Russia, and then remote after the operators had left Russia, they remotely opened the lorry roofs to allow the drones to fly out and attack the nearby airfields.
I see. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens. It's not good. And they're supposed to meet for peace talks tomorrow in Istanbul, so I'm not sure how that's going to help. Uh, let's have a look if you got. Oh, yeah, I think Echo had a question. Where is it? Oh, yeah. If there's to be a bail-in in the UK, do you think certain people will be told in advance so they can avoid losses? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sure that there's always insiders who get told, right, Clive?
Yeah, yes, uh, isn't it par for the course that the those in the know, those with the right friends, get let in on the secret before anything happens?
Yeah, I heard and read that in 1933, Clive, when Roosevelt issued the executive order, is it 6102, I think it was.
Yep, it was.
A lot of very wealthy Americans, they had taken their gold out already and sent it to Switzerland, so that they got a heads up.
Smart move.
Well, smart, but also they had the nod, as insiders. Yeah. Martin Armstrong suggesting gold to 6,100 on geopolitical events. That's surprising, Paul Leach says. That's surprising because Martin Armstrong is in the past always been never been too bullish gold, so that's quite interesting, and I'm not surprised. Elias El Khoury, did you notice the gold backwardation between May 23rd and May 29th? I had told you about it on May 25th. Is that on the Yeah, I didn't notice it because I don't really follow the futures. So, yeah, what's the front month now for gold in futures? I don't know. We are in June, is July. So what this means is that the June spot contract is higher than the July contract, which means that people would rather have physical. But yeah, and Professor Fekete, he's passed away. He said that when gold goes into permanent backwardation, it means that the dollar's toast. But I don't think it's going to be. I'm not sure it's Clive, because the futures exchanges and the bullion banks, they can always do things to manipulate the prices. So have you seen the backwardation, Clive?
I'm just looking now to Gold Futures to see if I can see any sign of that.
Yeah.
So the gold, the near month is 3315 and spot is 3289. So it's not in backwardation at the moment.
Yeah. Let's have a look here. I'm gonna bring the CME page too. Yeah. I'll show everyone how that backwardation just means that the spot price is higher than the futures price, which shouldn't happen. It should be in contango. So June is, I mean, it is a futures contract, but is in the delivery period. So it's as good as being a spot. and it's not really traded that much, and that's the other reason why sometimes the prices, the June contract probably doesn't trade every second like the what is it? The August is the front month because it trades 182,000. So what happens, and I worked in the futures market for 20 years, that you have constant trading in August, and then you get a trade in June, like 10 minutes later when the market has gone up, for example, and it looks like the June is trading above the August. So that's why you need to check the time of the quote. And it's really difficult to do that if you don't pay for the quotes. So yeah, I
So you
guess
you see 3313 on your screen. I see on a
yeah.
different one
So
3315
June
for
is
the August contract.
June, the spot is 3289, the last, and the August 3313. So there is no backwardation yet. So anyway, William, please, can you comment on GLDM and why do so few analysts discuss it? Thank you. Do you know what is GLDM? Uh,
I've never heard of that one.
is it
Um,
Gold Mining Inc.?
he doesn't mean GLDX, does he? GLDM. I'm just typing it in to see what comes up. That's funny. It comes at
Oh,
Goldman
it's
Sachs.
Gold Mini Shares Trust. Is that
Yeah,
it?
Spider Gold Mini Shares Trust is what it is.
I don't know what. Yeah,
It's
it's
obviously
ETF, isn't it?
some sort of fund which hold some ETF which holds gold, I guess.
Yeah, let's see
It does. It looks a bit spotty in the trading. It maybe not one of the most active ETFs.
more about the trust. Yeah, I'm not sure. Mini shares. Is it, does it hold mining companies or let's GDLM
Let's see if I can find it here.
ETF? Uh, yeah, it's a physical backed ETF. There you go. Welcome. Let me bring,
It's been existed since June 2018,
so yeah,
and it has a very low expense ratio of 0.1%, making it one of the most affordable ETFs available.
yeah, yeah, I think it's because the GLD is like the benchmark that everyone looks at. But
And it's pretty large, Mario. It says here it's got $14.86 billion of gold.
14.8 billion to, well, not of gold, of market cap, because I bet you they don't have any of the gold.
Okay.
Would be all this gold, I would say in the ETFs, they're all like shared with the LBMA, and it's all in my opinion, a scam. It's all leveraged, and I wouldn't get involved in it. Unfortunately, a lot of people do because there's 14.8 billion of exposure, Clive.
Well, that's what ChatGPT says, and I believe everything that GPT tells me, especially when I ask it how to spell raspberry.
Did it spell raspberry correctly?
No.
No.
If you
That's
ask it how many R's are in raspberry, it'll tell you there are two when there are really three.
yeah. Um, oh, I wanted to bring up this story here, Clive, and see what you think. What's his name? The Secretary of the Treasury. He's come out in response to Jamie Dimon's comments. He says, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent insists U.S. will never default on its debt. Trump administration officials seek to assuage growing investor concern over the country's public finances. Uh, I think I don't think it's a good, yeah, a good thing that he has to come out and say that. What do you think, Clive?
Oh, I agree. They're not going to default because they can print with impunity. They can print till the cows come home. But what
Mhm.
they might do is launch a new currency, such as the central bank digital currency, the CBDC, which is ostensibly convertible one for one with your dollars in your wallet and everything else, until the day they tell you you can't. That means that they can now run the US economy on the new currency, the CBDC, whilst at the same time printing infinite amounts of old dollars to pay off the national debt with no impact whatsoever on the economy because nobody can spend them.
Yeah, it says Scott Besson rejected a warning from JPMorgan chief Jamie Dimon about the bond market. Yeah, the other thing I would say, Clive, is that since August 15th, 1971, the U.S. has been technically in default because Richard Nixon he suspended he said it was convertibility of the currency into gold, but basically gold is a way to extinguish debt. So what the US and the rest of the world have been doing since August 15th, 1971, and the rest of the world, of course, has been pushed and coerced into doing it because America has been in charge, is to basically issue new debt to pay old debt. So it's like musical chairs, and one day all the chairs are going to run out, and people are going to be left holding the bag.
So that the problem with debt comes when when the government tries to borrow more money than the investors are willing to stump up. And that can happen very easily if the level of debt is growing faster than the GDP. Because if that's happening, then you're expecting people to put up a larger and larger percentage of their savings into government debt. And there comes a point where people say, I want to be diversified. I don't want to have 100% of my assets held in US government debt. They want to have it in other things. Um, so although we're some way away from that, I think with the level of debt and the high interest rates that they're having to roll over the maturing debt at, we're only going to get to a situation sooner or later where investors do get into indigestion. And I think that's probably coming in the next 12 months.
Yeah, Clive, someone asked if you could go over again how they would do the, keep paying the debt. Like, it's basically having a parallel currency, isn't it? Can you
Yeah.
ask if you could go over it again?
Well, one example, and there's many ways you can run parallel country currencies. I mean, just to sort of illustrate historically in the UK, before we had the exchange controls, where we had the dollar, what's called the dollar premium, therefore the pound traded at two different levels depending on where you were. There was something called ration coupons after the Second World War, and you couldn't actually buy anything unless you had a ration coupon to go with it. So even if you had £1 million in the bank, you were still limited to £1 of butter, which is what it said on your ration coupon. So the question is, what was the real currency? Was it the ration coupon or was it your money? Now, let's step forward to the modern world and the central bank digital currency, which I think will come. And it doesn't have to be a CBDC. It might be a gold-backed dollar, which they bring out overnight in a crisis. It could be anything. But let's assume that miraculously a second currency starts to emerge in the United States and the UK and Europe. And I'm going to call it the CBDC for simplicity. And then there's a crisis. Now, under the present expectations, the UK said this, Europe has said this. There will be limits on how much money can people can put into their central bank digital currency wallet. I think the UK is talking about £20,000 as a limit. Now they may raise that limit later on, but the point is, at any time they can restrict you from transferring your existing money into the CBDC wallet. And then we end up with a situation where the only money you're allowed to spend, according to the laws that will probably exist by then, will be the money in your CBDC wallet. And they'll say that's necessary because we need to know what you're doing with your money for anti-money laundering reasons, to avoid terrorism, and to make sure everyone's paying their tax. We don't want you paying your gardener with paper dollars where he's not going to pay his tax. We want everything to pass via wallets. So you might find that one day your ability to transfer your old currency into your CBDC wallet is not only restricted, but you can only spend what's in your CBDC wallet. What does that do to the existing currency? Well, it will probably still have some sort of value on day one because people will expect this restriction to be lifted. But I think even though they might describe the restriction brought about by some panic as temporary, it could well turn out that the restriction on moving your money from left to right is permanent, and therefore the value of your old money will rapidly fade away towards zero if people find they can't actually spend it on anything. On
Yeah,
the other hand, the government will be able to pay off its national debt, which is in the old currency. Big corporations which have issued debt in the old currency will be able to pay off their bonds in the old currency because it'll be effectively worthless.
yeah, but yeah, and that's why you need to get out of Dodge, I would say.
I mean, I just sort of say something about a move. Let's say we go to a gold dollar. There's a real possibility we might end
Clive,
up.
there's someone saying, Michael Kennedy, Clive, you've been saying this with no proof for years. Well, that he doesn't, it's not what he's trying to tell you, Michael, is what's happened in other countries that they do, and that they could do in the US. Clive is not saying that it's what they plan to do, but it's one of the possibilities, right, Clive?
Correct. So there's many other possibilities, such as buy-ins where people are invited through incentives or law to invest in government debt as well. I think this happened once in Brazil, where they basically said everyone with a bank account is going to contribute a certain amount above a certain level to the government, and they end up owning government bonds with which by the time those bonds were repaid some years later, they wouldn't buy very much.
Yeah, also in Cyprus, they people that had money in the bank that became shares in the bank, banks that were pretty much worthless, right?
Yeah, and take the Greek bonds where they changed the rules on the investors so that the ECB was repaid 100% of the bond value and everybody else had to go whistle.
Yeah, a lot of people are commenting here about CBDC. Don't use it. CBDC is madness. I agree. And CBDC is just, I think they're doing deliberately, all this money printing and the eventual collapse is to bring in the CBDC, which is basically a digital prison. And I think, yeah, I mean, we might have to all use CBDCs, but I think one way to remain relatively free, Clive, is to have some old money, i.e., gold and silver, because it gives you, it's very private and people will accept it all the time. It's never,
Well,
gold and silver have always been accepted.
I mean, let's face it, the fiat-based systems are look like they're on their last legs, and it's quite likely that at some point we cross over to a new fully backed currency. So we could be back on a gold or silver standard or a bimetallic standard. But when that happens, you're not you're not going to be free to transfer everything you want into the gold standard. So they'll say the first 5,000 or the first 10,000 or whatever it is that you've got, or first 100, who knows, can be transferred into the gold dollar or the gold pound or the gold euro. And the rest, you'll have to wait. Now, if that happens and we do that, do you want to be do you want to have the gold before and afterwards in physical gold coins, or do you want to wait and see what they tell you you're allowed to do? Because I think when the situation arises and people see it coming, it'll be too late to buy any physical metals because there'll be nobody willing to sell them at that point.
No, and they'll probably make it very difficult for you to buy with the new currency, right, Clive?
Yeah, they can with the CBDC, they can bring in all sorts of restrictions. They can, tell you whether you're allowed to buy train tickets or whether you can buy meat or what you're allowed to spend your money. I mean, one example which I illustrated was what if you're on social benefits and they decide, and I obviously this we can understand why they might decide this, that you're not allowed to spend your money on alcohol or gambling. Well, a lot of people say that's perfectly fine. But if they could go that far, they could then go to the next step and say you're not allowed to get on more than two aeroplanes a year, or you can't eat too much beef, or who knows what they might do, or they found that you're traveling to demonstrations and therefore you're not allowed to buy train tickets to the centre of towns. Who knows what they might decide if we got a CDBC? The point is, it is a programmable currency, and they'll be able to do what they would want with it, and that could make it very dystopian.
Oh, Francis is here. Um, there's a super chat. Thank you, Gold Rush. After the Gold Rush, how would I convert some of my precious metals to cash once the old currency cannot be transferred to my CBDC wallet? Hi, Francis. Sorry about the misunderstanding.
My wife's going to kill you, Mario. I
No, you know
told her
what?
no special steak tonight. I'm talking tomorrow at 8.
You know what happened?
Cancel it all. And then
I,
you sent 8:30.
well,
I
no,
thought, okay, he's
actually,
changed the time.
I actually set it for 8:30 by mistake, and then I edited the Zoom time, and then got another link, but the link was still saying 8:30, and I didn't realize that. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I was trolling Tom Luongo and a bunch of other people waiting for the time to come. Anyway, how are you doing? Good to see you, Clive.
Nice to see you, Francis. Francis, I have a question for you. You're in South Africa, is that right?
Cyprus at the moment.
Oh,
So we
okay.
moved back.
You were in South Africa.
I
Yeah,
have been, yes, and I will be returning part of my annual sojourn.
yeah. Oh,
So just a general question. This comment that we've heard by Mr. Trump that there's genocide of white farmers going on in South Africa, how much truth is there in that?
There is a slow motion, rather accelerated, a slow motion and accelerated probably don't deserve to go together, but there's an aging farming community whose kids have often moved out, particularly in the north. This is not so much a Western Cape thing, it's a big country, but it's far from, yeah, so it's remote. It's rural areas. There's very few police stations, and it's actually not always Black African South Africans either. It's from other people that appear to be weaponized that are often illegal immigrants, which makes catching even harder. So it does exist. The word genocide can be overly bandied around, but I would say it is it's like a boiled frog version of it. It's just a slow motion. The rate of deaths versus deaths generally in South Africa is significantly higher, and every of those white crosses does have a name. But it seems the BBC has chosen to put a stake in the ground saying it isn't happening. So because the intention of this is, it seems quite orchestrated and slow. I want to put, if you want to discuss this matter, there's other things to consider. NASA cooperated with air traffic control in South Africa and are flying fancy G6 aeroplanes with mineral scanning infrared. And simultaneously going on in South Africa is an appropriation without compensation bill. And so if you want to think broadly, you can imagine that the mineral rich lands, which is we talk precious metals obviously a lot. So known at 1 year actually delivered over 1,000 tons of gold, South Africa, and is the biggest by far of platinum. And recently on that point also had Zelensky buy a controlling stake with as frontman for his billionaires that are behind him in North Platts. There's a lot going on in the mineral space, and Trump obviously wanting Greenland and Canada. The end of the fiat system, the focus on minerals, the commodity boom. There are a lot of people that seem to have been handed the script recently that you and I have always had in mind. And South Africa is one of those places which is deeply invested. And, the original chase of the British after the Boers was when they first hit diamonds in Kimberley and then they hit gold in Johannesburg, which led to the two Boer Wars. So its history is stooped on banking interests chasing the crown into wars when you had the Dutch and the French Huguenots literally just trying to escape governance and be free libertarian people that could manage and roam themselves. So there's quite a bit of interesting history, but there's a lot of facts I can give you on that. The farmer murders is very cruel as well when it happens. It's not just a bullet to their head and take what you can. There's a habit of prolonged torturing and various other things, which are quite gruesome. And I think that's to invoke fear. And it feels a bit Bolshevik to me, for those of you that know your Russian history as well. So there's lots of parallels to be drawn. That's quite a big, long answer. So if you want more, I can give you more, but I'll let you
Yeah.
soak that up.
Yeah, farmers they seem to be under attack in Europe as well, here in the UK as
There's
well.
a theme on that, which is why I mentioned Bolshevism and
Francis,
communism.
Francis, one of the reasons I wanted you to come on, well, there's a few reasons. The first one is that people always ask, oh, when you're going to have Francis on again. But the other one is to do with the title of the live stream that Jamie Dimon warned about a crack in the bond market. And I used your what you said here. This is called establishing alibi in my thumbnail. So I thought it would be more than fair to have you on because I didn't take
Sure.
credit for it. But so maybe you could explain to the viewers what you mean by the establishing alibi.
A few Yes, a few quick thoughts. So, establishing alibi is very much when insiders that are actually party to something they've actually created make comments that appear to be distant observers on the hill pointing out that something untoward is on the way, as if they are remotely distant from this and just giving you a heads up as a dispassionate observer on a nearby hill, not as the general of the very collapse that has been engineered. So establishing alibi allows them to say very soon or afterwards, hey, we did warn you. What you and I and Clive could possibly do to reverse a collapsing debt market from our various homes, me on my e-bike pedaling up the hill here in Cyprus and you guys, is unbeknownst to us. But at least having put on record these concerns allows them to say, hey, we did warn you. And it also, there's a thinking in certain gematria and various other things that if they've told you it's not a crime, if it happens, it's almost foregoes any karmic repercussion. That's a little bit more of an esoteric element. But here's the key things I take out of that not everybody might take. It's typically a 2 minutes to midnight warning. For many people, they say, particularly, we did call the COVID events, that was part of the oil. But since then, when we've spoken in a concerning way, they say, well, you're just a doomer and you're talking everything down. When's it going to happen? We're tired of hearing you say it's going down. Look at the stock market, these kind of things. And a timing tool is the 2 minutes to midnight warning. Because they don't want to give these kind of warnings, especially as emphatically as he has done, unnecessarily too early. So they tend to be within plausible deniability of time. Not immediately. They don't want it to happen the very next day, but then it looks like they orchestrated it themselves. But it starts a very short-term clock for when the event will happen. That's point number one. There's a second point that I want to iterate. By telling you that they know and have that suspicion, they created it, they should know. They're also forewarning the fact that they're probably also going to profit out of it.
Oh yeah, Jamie Dimon said we will be fine, didn't he?
Yes, and the notes and comments about that you've just picked up and mentioned will be fine. In fact, we're going to be even better than fine. We've made an absolute bundle on the way up in manufacturing this event, and we know it's a massive pyre of burning cinders, and we're going to make the same amount of money on the way back down, shorting it. But you in the street, let me just warn you, your system's going to be wrecked and there's going to be chaos. So I see the fact that he's actually probably at some point in retrospect, we'll find out, like Stanley Druckenmiller, like Paul Tudor Jones, that they are disproportionately short and looking forward to the win on the downside at everybody else's great suffrage. So those are a couple of the things. The timing is getting closer. And the fact that they are going to be doing just dandy out of it all is two quick takeouts that I would infer from what goes unsaid and a few stylistic points that you yourself just picked up on there. So that's a quick unload. I've got more, but I'll let you digest that.
Yeah, Clive, there was a super chat which I haven't replied to. Maybe you can answer this one, is how would I convert some of my precious metals to cash once the old currency cannot be transferred to my CBDC wallet. And I'll come back to the other topic in a minute, Francis, because I wanted to say something about the ECB as well.
If we have a new currency, anything that you own, and that would include gold, but it also include any other possessions you own that you want to sell, you can simply go to a specialist who deals in that particular item, in this case, a gold dealer, and he will pay you the going rate in the new currency, which may be higher or lower than it was in the old currency because we're not, the old currency and the new currency are no longer the same thing. But there's no reason at all I can think why you wouldn't be able to go to a dealer and say, a legal dealer, and say, please, will you buy my gold off me? Alternatively, you'll be able to sell it peer to peer over eBay or whatever auction site you have in your country.
Yeah, Francis, I wanted to ask your opinion on the ECB. They warned, I think, just over a week ago about the gold market, that the leverage in it, and they didn't mention the bullion banks and their paper scam, but they basically said it could bring down the whole financial system. Do you think they're establishing alibi as well? It seems interesting that you got Jamie Dimon establishing alibi in the bond market, and then the ECB in the paper or bullion market.
That feels more like a pre-directed false blame for what may transpire. So what you do is the technique is I want to blame gold. And actually the cure, which is the remedy for an ailing system, when you are sick, everything that is healthy, it represents something that's non-aligned to you. So you blame the healthy person for your sickness, and that is establishing perp. So you get establishing alibi, and then you get establishing the perpetrator. So this is a misdirect pre-establishing the perpetrator for the pending collapse. A runaway, they actually used in the same, I saw the same articles as you. So establishing blame or perpetrator, they also spoke as gold as a bubble in similar articles in around that. So the establishment are going to make out that there's a confidence crisis and too much money's fled into the pet rock. And this has caused the system to collapse, which you and I will both know to not be true. But it's already a deflection strategy that is being implemented early. What they've learned is you've got to get the lie out really quickly, or at least establish your tent, your pitch in terms of how you're going to be handling that, because it's also a focus point for all the junior leaders within the banking cartel. They'll also reference, and then they'll say, well, we have been pointing out that this gold bubble is destabilizing to our financial system. All these people that have just decided to go all analog on us, or these kind of statements can start coming out and being well proliferated. And if you get enough people to get it out and repeat it, you kind of get that a little bit of that CV19 vibe about your vaccine not working unless everybody else takes it, and all sorts of peculiarities. So if you can quickly get this repetitive narrative, so that sounds more like establishment of perp rather than alibi. But at the same, it has a duality though, because it's also saying that we are looking vulnerable. So it's achieved both. It's almost it's a brilliant double lie. There's problems, but it's a kind of way of admitting there's problems and immediately saying, and he done it. It's a bit like post 9/11. Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden. Everybody had it. Even the everybody within minutes. So it's kind of okay. Well, funny that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like in the 30s, I've got Benjamin Roth's diary. I don't know if you've heard of that. And he's a lawyer in the 1930s who was writing about what was going on in the economy and the markets, and they were really blaming hoarders. People who wanted gold. They were the bad people. Yeah, so I agree with you.
And we should expect that.
Yeah, yeah.
In other words, not
It's going
only
to be
will it
our
be
fault,
gold.
not their fault. And it's basically the central bankers' fault and the government's for creating this debt bubble through money printing. Yeah, it's really amazing. And unfortunately, Francis and Clive, I think a lot of people are going to buy into it.
Well, it
Yeah.
will. It will be very much a case of not only will it be gold, it was the problem, but the people that invested in gold became the problem. That's why I say, the pet rock lovers and bugs, and you can hear the language will be, quite discriminatory. And anybody who pursues self-reliance and sound money is, in fact, an enemy in a fiat world. It is Voltaire, where telling truth is a revolutionary act in a liar's system. And I think we're going to get that. And they need to tarnish not only the perp that is gold, but the other conspirators, which are those that all hoarded into gold. So we are all demons in the liar society, in a perverse inversion.
Yeah.
So I think we should all be prepared for that, and they're going to get that message out, which will also lay the ground for envy. Crabs in the bucket envy, no one gets to escape. That'll make it very fertile ground for taxation, confiscation, or other demerit activities that are out to punish us. So I say owning gold is the beginning. There's a lot of game theory work we've got to do on self-preservation and combating the demonization, which is one of the reasons why I appear in shows like this. The more people we have, even if they just have a 20th of an ounce, who understand sound money, it's one less person that's going to be calling you an unmasked anti-vaxxer or the equivalent of in the financial realm. So we're going to get quite a bit of blowback and aggression directed in our direction. It's going to have envy behind it, and it's going to have the mainstream media talking about us in the most devalued kind of language, let's just say. So there will be an attack vector put on us for destabilizing their fiat system, even though it was built and designed and exploited to topple. And this is a controlled demolition for which we played no part actively. That is unfortunately what we're going to have to get used to, and getting our stories out early about how we'll be called the collaborators to undermining the financial system, the pet rock accumulators, and all of this. We've got to watch out and warn that is where they're going to go. So we're getting our story out in front of them, as the ECB is trying to do,
Yeah.
in terms of establishing both an alibi and a perpetrator at the same time. It was the funny shiny metal that broke our system. And unfortunately, we're in a propaganda war here, and they have the mainstream media and the biggest echo chambers.
Yeah, you mentioned the telling it the truth is a revolutionary act. It was George Orwell, apparently. He said, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Thank you, Joe Potter, for pointing that out. I want to ask both of you this question.
Corrected.
One question, because we're hearing a lot about not just the treasury market being in trouble in the US, but also the JGB and yen carry trade. And I was thinking about the other day both problems, and I've covered the yen carry trade for years. I have a playlist, and I've always said that could be one of the triggers for the collapse. But it looks to me now, and I'm not like a meteorologist, and I'll ask you this, Clive, first, you answer first. Could it be that the US Treasury market and the JGB market are like two fronts, and they're going to collide, and then it's going to be a huge hurricane, or like really bad storm? Is that how you see it, Clive?
It is a possibility because the yields on Japanese bonds are rising very rapidly, and that basically means some sort of intervention might be needed by the Central Bank of Japan, so the BOJ. So one way they might decide to do that is by selling US treasuries so they can buy long-dated Japanese debt to basically cap the rise of the yields. But of course, that's not going to do any good for the US debt because it will be driving, if they sell a lot of it, and they have a lot to sell, it'll be driving up the yields of the United States. And the United States can't actually go out and sell Japanese bonds to buy its own bonds because it doesn't have any Japanese bonds, as far as I know. So it could be that the Japanese end up toppling the US Treasury market. That's a possibility. It would be, I mean, I don't think it's their plan because it wouldn't be in their best interest because if they start selling large amounts, it will drive down the price, reducing the value of what they hold. So the way they'd probably want to do it is very gradually. But of course, they are in this terrible situation where the yield on their long dated bonds has risen from approximately zero, let's call it 0.1%, to nearly 3% now. So that's what, 30 times as much, is it? Something like that. Rollover of debt is costing the Japanese government a lot more, and they've got debt to GDP ratio, which is one of the highest in the world. I think only Sudan has got more than them.
Yeah, Francis, what's your take on the
I
both?
don't think the Japanese will be allowed to sell treasuries. So if you look at our interview with Professor Werner, essentially Japan lost its financial sovereignty post World War II, is the short version of how he explains it, the edited higher. Not entirely on all things micro, but at the macro level. Japan is, of the 33% that is held offshore, foreign holders, Japan is the largest and is regularly used as a backstopper when treasury auctions aren't looking great. I want to also point out, Mario, as you're in the UK, and Clive obviously had ties there, although no longer, that the UK is now second place and has just surpassed China as accumulator. So in terms of toxic banks that are keeping the US shored up, everybody is making out that I was listening, as I say, I was trolling Tom, he was Luongo, and he was mentioning, actually, we had a great 5-year auction and all of this. The Fed has actually been buying and purchasing treasuries. Credit default swaps are going up immensely. So there tends to be, there's very good American analysts, but there's also quite a Pax Americano American analyst that seems to think that they're always still the least dirty shirt in the laundry. And the debt problem is an American debt problem that's catching on in other places and has highlighted the Japanese problem. But the main collapse and contagion is actually an American one in terms of their trade, their deficit, and the overall debt size, plus the current interest rates they are paying and the affordability of them. And Trump's just added to that with the big beautiful bill, which is very non-doggy and very non-Elon and Spence. So that could be in the UK. That was Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's moment. That kind of a similar bill, a stimulus bill, a tax-friendly bill, et cetera, et cetera. And that would have had them experience that. So it is a debt-based collapse that we are facing, and America is right at the center of that storm. And there's a lot of deflection. They say a lot of people will come out and say, but China's wrecked and their property market. It's true to a degree. Many will point out Japan as a higher to GDP, but it's actually quite different. A lot of America's debt is unfunded. And liabilities that are not counted. And when people add that, they're actually worse than Japan. And the Japanese own their own debt. And in actual fact, the yields are going up on Japanese debt, which makes the need for Japanese ladies that send money offshore to invest in treasuries no longer be required and could have their money closer to home, especially when they're hearing scary stories about CDSs being spiking and America's potential default. And of course, a hegemon falls harder and further than even the Eurozone would, who's equally sick, but is not the hegemon. So there's a lot of American maximalism out there. That's what I feel I need to fight, particularly within certain American analysts, and there's some very earnest and frank ones. But America is the one that's in deep, deep trouble here. Yes, that doesn't mean the rest of the world is perfect, etc. But they overspend consistently by a huge margin. They create T-bills for the deficit and those and treasuries, and those are not desired anymore. And they are getting a massive spike on people insuring against their eventual default right now. China, for all its problems, produces way more than it consumes and stacks gold with its surplus. So decide which team you want to be. Now, I don't want to choose communists over a nation that was meant to be a free market capitalist nation, but has actually turned into a bit of a cacocracy. But I can tell you it turns out worse for the Americans and worse for the West in my overall take, although the ripples and repercussions of what we're going to go through will affect everyone to varying degrees. But I do think that that's one point I do want to get across. America is going to go through a real firestorm regardless, but eventually, will Japan be allowed to defend themselves? Initially, I think America will do everything to make them hold on and die. And it seems Japan and America and the UK are tied to the American mast in terms of holdings and accumulations. Then you have the mysterious buying of Cayman Islands, Belgium, and Luxembourg, which could just be, hedge funds and proxies there housed, or I don't even know. I don't think any of us know, and I don't think they want us to know too much about it. But I think the debt system has already failed and is being held up. And the Fed itself has had to purchase recently. I think 43 billion is what they down. So anyone who tells you that it's the American debt system had a great auction probably doesn't want to scratch too low beneath the surface as to who's holding that up. This is ready to go, and it's typical of controlled demolitions. You get everything virtually ready to fall over, and you make sure the last thing is in place, so that literally you just have to pull the little domino, one little domino out, and the whole thing goes. And I suspect the debt markets are one that have been very, very ready to implode in the US. What does it mean for Japan? I think Japan is married to the death spiral that America will go through to a varying degree. But as a non-hegemon, it will be slightly less damaging. But they both got terrible demographics as well. It's not going to be pleasant for Japan either.
Yeah, and Professor Werner, I think he didn't he write Ministry of Finance? I think I have that book about
The
Japan.
Princes of the Yen was
Princes of the
the most popular, and
Yeah,
he's a very fluent German and English speaker who went to Japan
yeah,
and is actually accredited with the phrase quantitative easing that
yeah, yeah.
commenced in the 80s. Yeah,
The other thing, Clive and Francis, that could be happening is FASB 56, it's called. This was signed by Trump when Trump was in office, I think 2017, 2018. And Catherine Austin Fitz is, she talks a lot about this. And basically, it allows the US government, the Treasury, and big corporations to hide all their financial transactions if there's a national security reason for it. So they could use anything. So it could be the Fed buying treasuries via the Cayman Islands. I mean, they've done. Do you remember the '08 crisis? They had that Maiden Lane.
correct.
Now that was offshore. So yeah,
Yeah,
they could be stuffing.
it's
Yeah,
my default assumption. There's proxies that are already holding
yeah,
things up that they use.
yeah, yeah.
Well, just on the Cayman Islands, I used to work in the Cayman Islands for 3 years as part of my career. And at the time, this was many decades ago, Cayman was reputed to be one of the biggest holders of Eurobonds globally. But we never, nobody on the islands ever traded these bonds. I mean, I think in my whole 3 year period there, I must have traded a maximum of 10,000 US dollars worth of Eurobonds. Sorry, beg your treasuries. But what we all had, every bank had, was inside the boss's drawer, there would be half a dozen banks or a dozen banks from all around the world who had banking licenses in the Cayman Islands, but no physical presence except inside the bank where they were housed. And the way it worked is every month these banks would send through the balance sheet of their Cayman Island branch to our head office, and then we'd file it with the government. But reality, there was no actual physical trading of Eurobonds or US Treasuries going through the Cayman Islands at all. It was all done in London or New York or somewhere else and reported back to us by the banks who were doing it ostensibly in the name of their Cayman Island subsidiary.
Someone said here, Clive, National Disgrace said Clive is a money launderer. Lol.
Well, how does he work that one out?
No, I'm joking. Back in the Cayman Islands. No,
Oh well, no. We you know what? Every uh, in my entire career, I'm going to tell you the story. I'll tell you a little story because it's a true story. And this only happened once, and it happened in the Cayman Islands. One day, a lady came in and said she wanted to deposit money into an account, which wasn't her account. And this was very, very unusual because we didn't really have people coming and depositing money. But anyway, so I went to see my boss and said, "There's someone that wants to deposit money. What do I do?" And he said, "Go and ask her how much she's got." So I went back and she said, "Well, I've got $500,000. Here it is. It's cash." And she opened the bag and it was full of stacks of dollars. So I went back to my boss and said, "What do we do?" He said, "We're not taking it." He said, I don't want to send bundles of banknotes back to the United States with our rubber bands around it. You tell her to go and find another place. So she disappeared, and we sent her away without taking the money. And then a few months later, another lady appeared. This time it was a paralegal secretary who had been sent by a law firm in the United States to deposit the money. And she said, "I've come to deposit $5,000 because I heard you won't take more than $5,000. That's what I told the first girl. And I said, "Well, why have you flown all the way from the United States to deposit $5,000? And she said, "Oh, yes, after I deposit this, I've got another 495,000 to deposit. My boss said I can stay as long as it takes to deposit it all." Of
Yeah.
course, she got sent away. But realistically speaking, all these stories of money laundering, if it was happening, I never saw it in my career.
No, I think it was just a joke, Clive. Anyway, uh, Francis, just wanted to ask you your opinion on what could the repercussions of what's happened today in Russia vis-a-vis the Ukraine. I guess you've seen that.
Yes. In fact, it was going to be part of the response, but I thought I would have been sprawling a bit in my answer if I started going geopolitical on the military. So cometh the escalation and all of the 2 minutes to midnight warnings on potential debt travails. It's not surprising that we have a major escalation in kept on the back burner and leaking away war between Ukraine, and the more the specifics about it, it shows the signs of quite clever planning. It shows drone technology. It shows they had cargo which opened essentially containers, but that were designed to open and release these, and they were well established near the bases as well. So it's a punch in the guts quite close. I'm a bit mystified actually, and maybe even a bit disappointed in the Russians. From some of the footage I saw, it looked like, they had their equivalent of B-52 bombers that had nuclear capacity literally parked in a row on an airway. And I would imagine that underground concrete bunkers for massive planes like that would have been far more normal given the satellite photography that can be done. So that's a little point of suspicion there for me. But nonetheless, if we take the story at face value, which I'm not entirely sure I'm doing, but let's just say so, it's a major escalation, and the important point is it's not Ukrainian. It's in the name of Ukraine, yes, yes, yes. And maybe some of the grunts that were driving the trucks would have been Ukrainian who speak Russian potentially. But the planning, the operation, the training, the materials, everything else is very much NATO-esque. And Putin's called a security meeting, and he's typically been quite restrained. But I would say you have civilian casualties on the bridge, which is totally criminal and unnecessary. That's terrorism. I can understand in a war if you bomb, energy infrastructure, airfields, various other things, but waiting to kill one of them. It was a 6-month baby. It's not a good look. It puts you in the Israeli category of baby killers as well. To kill civilians on a bridge. But I think if you want to really infuriate and antagonize, civilian deaths are one way to do it. It does also give a license to the reciprocator to do similar, which I hope not. Because typically Putin, for all the people that like to criticize him, he's actually a trained lawyer, and he tends to focus quite legally and say, well, if that's that. He's quite clear about the lines of escalation and international law in his own set of manners and principles. And has actually been surprisingly, in my opinion, restrained in response. He's allowed the slow burn war that he's slowly won I think. We say one, it's clearly not over in terms of what NATO are prepared to do. But I get the impression NATO are running out of money for sending Zelensky, and they really needed a quick punch in the nose, and they need an escalation to continue to make new funds come in, because I think they've been a bit bled. Since Trump's come in, I don't think the Biden flow has gone nearly as well. And as a result, they need this escalation, and they need a disproportionate response almost to try create howls of Putin's a barbarian, look what he's just done. And actually, disproportionate attack might not be to Putin's best interest, because the longer he keeps it as a petering out low tempo war, the harder the ask. There's fatigue, there's Ukraine fatigue. Just like, there's been BLM fatigue and all these other initiatives. There's a fatigue about it. And without new moral indignation, which would come from a disproportionate response from Putin, they're going to battle to find the money and justify this. It's very hard to be beating up on someone and spending money, time, and energy on it, where actually not so much is coming back your way. It's not to say Russia hasn't been aggressive, but in its conventional sense in Ukraine. So I'm not too sure whether the smart money is a restrained, rather don't react because he recognizes the money's going. But the risk is, if he does lose his cool a little bit, or does respond disproportionately, it may not only be Ukrainian territory. So you could have a direct attack on Germany or any place he thinks has played a disproportionate role in this attack, which could be a real escalation, which is kind of what NATO, I think, wants, because then they get this contagion and distraction going that will mask the collapsing debt markets. And that tends to create fear. Sometimes stock markets can go both up and down. You'll typically have the oil price maybe get a bit of a rally if it heats up, but you could have a bit of fear seeing a bid in bonds, which could see the yields just come out of the headlines. I think they're going to try and do things that just takes the long end of the bond markets, both Japan, both America, and a couple of other Western nations also, out a little bit out of the debt collapse vibe.
Yeah.
So we could have a bit of a pullback. And I'm not sure if that escalation response and everything that goes with it might do that. But that also could bring stock markets down as well. So who knows?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it is provocation. It's a bit like Gerald Celente has said, when everything else fails, they take you to war. Someone's actually said, are you going to tolerate a Russian apologist? And, well, Polar Man said that. You need to go back to 2014 to understand what's going on in the Ukraine. So, and the other thing I would say about Putin is that he's actually quite moderate. If you had Medvedev in charge, things would be a lot worse. So that's what I have to say. And even if I didn't agree with Francis, I would let him speak his mind. But I pretty much agree with everything he said. And yeah, I think it could be that they trying to turn treasuries and European government bonds and gilts back into safe haven plays by doing this. I'm not sure if they will succeed. What do you think, Clive?
All I can say is what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, I find it, living here in Europe, I find it extremely worrying. That's all I can say about it.
Yeah, yeah. So we usually only go till like 9 o'clock, but it's 12 past, and we'll keep going a little bit because Francis didn't come in at the right time. So Francis, any views on what could happen to gold and silver because of this? I know it's always really difficult to predict with gold. It could get hammered by the bullion banks tomorrow or over tonight. Well, I mean, in a world where gold traded freely would probably be, well, there probably wouldn't be any fiat currency left.
We sense that gold is actually setting up continuation pattern for the upside, Mario.
You want
And
to bring up the chart? I can let you.
yes, I was going to ask if you
Yeah,
can permission
go ahead.
that.
Yeah.
Let's just see where you're at. Let me find that.
Oh, yeah. And after we look at gold, could we look at platinum, Francis? One of the viewers wants to look at platinum, which is a little different, but
Yes, sorry, I've lost the browser for where I share. I've lost your browser. Oh, here we go. There we go. It fell behind mine. Something for people that think anybody's a Russian apologist is to study the history, by the way, while
yeah,
we
yeah,
get that up.
I agree.
The St. Katerina the Great settled Ukraine.
Yeah,
That's part of the greater Grand Russia. She sent the military officers to marry, and were given free land.
yeah,
That has always historically been long before. So it's a bit like snapping off Sussex and then saying it's not part of England. You need to brush up on your history. Gold divided by the CPI. For those that want to call tops on gold, I would definitely point out this. You've really only just started. This is multi-month. It's a quarterly chart, 3 months. This is gold divided by the liar number, I call it, but it's the best we have. It's
yeah,
not actually the shadow stats number, which would be even more squared downwards. And we really only just broke this on a quarter, the quarter of July 2024. So it's very, very early doors. I'll point out that the reason this is such an ascending line under these lows is because of so much understated inflation in my expectation, and the rate at which we're creating proliferating fiat. So this has had a very strong lid across here, and it's only just recently broken out. So in terms of the quarter, you had the breakout quarter, you had an indecision candle, then you had a real move, and we're part the way of a quarter. So in terms of our 3 month view, what are we? We've just started June. So actually, that means it's the 6th month. We're in the last month of the second quarter. So we've got 30 days to see where this candle settles. We've got two of them baked in. But if I take you into a more shorter time, easily a recognizable chart, which I'm happy to do, let's just stay with gold before we go to the platinum. I really like what I'm seeing. We needed a bit of a rest. We'd made a number of targets, including against the Swiss franc, which has been the strongest fiat, by the way, of recent history. Clive may take some small pride in that, but I
mhm.
think he's still more gold bug than fiat man, if I know him to be the man he is. Yeah, this is a classic continuation pattern for us technically. It's a broadening structure, and it goes like that, and we call it a slide. It's a bit like the thing you jump out of on a 747 when things go wrong. You had a little bit of a correction there. We had warned when we crossed the 3,000 you would get that. You might remember 6 months ago when I last met you, I said 2,950 approaching 3,000. There'll be a bit of a reaction before going further. We had that reaction, and then we had Trumped tariff tantrum. I call it the three T's. And what actually happened is the dollar went down and the bonds went down, which was the microcosm of what happened to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng that we'd said would come for America in
Yeah.
due course. And that was the first flash that you had of
Yes,
it.
John, sorry, it's weird because I heard someone tell me years ago that, like, for some reason, whenever you have a crisis in the UK, it will happen a few years later in the US. It's interesting.
I've never heard that rule. I think it's maybe a bit general for my liking, but we clearly are synchronized indebted. The UK is a smaller market and can't tolerate to the same degree things in America, but America, the degree things have got to in America are so bad, and I would say even worse, surprisingly, than a very bad UK in some ways when you look at the rates. But they're not too different now with the UK. But nonetheless, we could see that happening. And it ended up happening even faster than we thought. That's that super spike run up you had. And whenever you had a major surge, I mean, literally every day we were almost making a new high. for a number of weeks. So we're on a daily chart here, actually.
Yeah.
So it should worth me saying. So you had 1, 2, 3. You had a very small pennant there. Then you had 4, 5, 6. 6 out of about 9 days of just massive moves. You went from around 2.8 at the dip, 2.9. I apologize, to 3.5. That's a lot. That's about almost a $600 move. So it's quite natural for us to have a bit of a breather. So this broadening structure, the line we expect to have technically broken is the upper one. So what is happening is there was a bit of leverage. It's been shaken out. There's a bit of surges on news and a little bit of release. You typically get 3 moves as well, and we're in the third. So I'll just show you that as well. But structurally, it's technically very interesting for us. 1, 2, and then I think you've had your biggest down leg here. I think that's already in. You could use that technically as stops, and I think we break this. But you may have a dip down one more time, maybe to our splitter here, before coming back up and breaking that line. So that's a resting continuation pattern. And we like getting in there. The last one we got in was here, which gave us that bump, small rest, and that bump. And a bigger one was here. And you can see that in most instances, you get really good runs coming out of that. So this pause that everybody is saying, yeah, you see a high. That's why I showed you the other chart first. It's just started. People are going to sell too soon on it's already done so much. Yes, there will be localized highs and pullbacks for spells, but it's not forever to wait. It was back end of April. We're just starting June. So, okay, you had an indifferent May. But for given the months you've had since 2024 November when it broke from 2000, it's an incredible run. So I think we'll be in sometime in June. I think we'll be breaking out of that structure, and you could even make a new high in that June month, or you could see it in July. And by the way, it's a terrible time. Sell in May and go away, come back in St. Leger's Day is the same for equities. So I'd imagine stock markets generally are going to languish. We've already seen the long end of the bonds are a threat at the moment. They need a little bit of fear to back up that. So you might get a bit more support on bond markets. You can have a weaker general equity market, apart from possibly miners. It's a pretty good environment, I think, for gold in a time of, if there is a war escalation, gold is again the reserve asset for that, particularly as faith has been lost in debt markets. So again, this looks good. I saw David Hunter was talking about he thinks the bond market's been oversold and it's going to come back. And for people that, while I think short term there may be a technical rally, I do want to say this debt-based collapse is really only in chapter 1 of a long story. So just to counter that view, I feel that if you look at the longer end of the American market, you're very, very close to previous highs. Yes, you're having a technical pullback here, but to call the end of the bond devaluation cycle here for any meaningful time is something I certainly wouldn't do. And our view is you will go higher in due course, but there is room here on a sort of rising wedge basis for you to get a little bit of a bid back in bonds and the yields to come a little bit back into the mix before breaking out. But I think this is going to turn into an upside continuation structure, a bit like what gold is doing now, which has gone sideways. You're going to have a slightly longer version of this before we get further decay. And just on top of that is the dollar. You have to look at this with the dollar devaluation. We have a diagram that shows a geyser being heated up, ready to explode. And there's 2 taps that you release the pressure. One is the valuation of the debt, which is these rates going up. They've played that to a long degree. Too many people are talking about it. That tap has to close, but the cylinder will blow if you don't open another tap, and that's been the currency. So when we split the chart and we look at what the dollar's done while the TLT was not going lower, the dollar was taking a lot of the pressure out of that mark. In other words, the benchmark for comparison. And remember, he has a horrible deficit. He wants people to buy less imported goods. Actually, the thing that Trump probably wants but will never say is a weaker currency. And you've already seen some of that. So watch the dollar, and a weak dollar will be supportive for Bitcoin and gold and potentially silver. and platinum. Let me know if you want to bring up the platinum
Oh
market as
yes,
well.
please. Yeah, please. Let's have a look. I personally think, yeah, platinum needs to break 1200, I guess, to but yeah, I'll let you give your opinion on it.
Yeah, so platinum underperformed chronically. In fact, I've got an even better diagram. This is the live prices, but I'll show you that better diagram as well. But we broke out of a long-term falling wedge. It was destroyed by the fact that green policies were taking diesel engines out, and it was being used in catalytic converters, and there was some replacement with palladium that actually did rather well, and platinum was getting substitution as well as a bearish kind of industrial precious metals market. It is subsequently squeezed very, very nicely, and we are long this, anticipating it going up, but it hasn't fully broken yet. It needs to take out that level for us. But here's a chart that shows you how undervalued platinum is. And the thing that's happening in China is they're looking, I feel, there's definitely something going on in terms of precious metals relative valuations. I'm going to bring this chart up for you. And I hope it's big enough to show. The candles is the platinum market. That's where platinum stands, XPT. Rhodium is in black, and it had a huge run and has given back 80% of that. So you've had the industrial platinum group and associated metals like rhodium have the run. You can see palladium in gray when rhodium had that run, also was running and was eating platinum's dinner. And platinum was actually softening continually. But it's also crashed back down and is just above silver in overall for the last 20 years. The chart is from 2005.
Yeah.
We're talking about the last 20 years with the base point being that particular year. It's not long after gold and silver turned up from its worst point, essentially. Gold, of course, is winning the race as first mover and the most monetized metal. And it's because we're having a reserve assets crisis that gold is the first runner and is being bought by the central banks and the big money. Palladium is actually next with silver slightly behind, but palladium has been in a downtrend, and I could see silver flipping palladium for its slightly more monetary people's money element, and the fact that the industrial might affect palladium more than silver. There's an industrial component to silver. But if you look at this, it's incredibly rare. I at one point was saying there was 20 gold ounces found for one platinum ounce. I got that from somewhere on the internet. Then I've seen other people say there's only 2 gold ounces for every one platinum. So I'm a bit confused now and a bit more reluctant given the variety of views. But platinum is significantly rarer. And as a South African, I spent my whole life hearing the gold and the platinum price read out on the radio, very important to our country as a child. And platinum was nearly always 30% from the primary childhood and teenagedom above gold. And of course, this industrial use and then the substitution has actually seen it being greatly undervalued. And I would treat that Zelensky investment with the billionaires behind him as very much a sign that it's time to get your positions on. The downside for Brits and some Europeans is that it's still got the industrial tag and has VAT added. So best to buy when you're in the Americas, where you can buy at spot price. Also, the spread will be a bit higher. But again, remember, it's a bit unique and special and may not be as easy to dispose of. I'd be happy to buy it, but off someone else if I can scan it. But it just might be slightly harder to sell on. So it shouldn't be too much of your precious metals portfolio. There's actually no real reason to get overly exotic. Gold will do you just fine and a healthy smattering of silver. But if you want to play, and we are going to get a bit of real revaluation in platinum, it could move really, really far, really, really fast on thin markets. Thin markets can do that. You see
Yeah.
what rhodium did
Yeah.
and palladium.
Great.
There was an article in the FT, I think it was, which said that Chinese buyers are starting to buy platinum because they find gold now too expensive, and they're buying what is the cheaper metal, which hasn't gone up yet.
Yeah.
Yes. That's why I was saying the relative valuations. And thank you for reminding me of that, because I saw the same article and I wanted to make this point on the gold silver ratio as well, in that there seems to be a tit for tat. While gold is resting, we're at this critical 100 gold silver ratio. And we've been sort of pivoting around it for an extended period now. And you can see the minute we hit 98, it seems gold is getting bought. The minute we hit 100 or 102, it seems silver is getting bought. So over here, there's a bit of people. So there's somebody is watching the relative valuations, and I wouldn't put it past China. It seems that you've got a sweet spot between 99 and 102, maybe. You look at the volume by price, very much on the 100 level. That if it's on the low side, they might take the gold. If it's on the high side, they might be substituting silver. We've actually gone very low volatility here. So the market is going to be making a mind up, and there could be a surge. If we have a very disinflationary event, it's usually bad for silver.
Yeah.
So that could go up. If we have a run into the precious metals, this could break down and we could finally get that moment where silver starts outperforming. But there's possibly something coming because there's a squeeze here. So that tells me people are watching the relative valuations. When you add that platinum story that Clive referenced, that platinum hasn't moved as much, that you don't need a lot of Chinese people to start buying a very rare metal for that movement to start moving. And if it's seen as relatively cheap, it's also got the scarcity. It's also used in jewelry. Some of the best Rolexes have platinum instead of white gold or yellow gold. It's very pristine metal and highly sought after. You could see platinum need to run before gold moves meaningfully higher. But I just think the everyday acceptance of gold just will dominate, and that the bulk of people will balk at getting overly exotic. But there will be a move. It doesn't take a lot to move the needle on platinum if there's Chinese getting in there. So we could see a bit of a reduction in the premium gold has over platinum.
Great. I'm just going to share your page, Francis, so that the viewers know where to go if they want to subscribe to the Market Sniper. And also, Clive has got his channel now. And Clive, someone noted they enjoyed watching your son pick gold over paper.
Yeah, this was when he was 5 years old, and I basically did the same trick my grandfather had done to me, but in a different way. I put in front of him a 50 euro note and a gold ring, as it happened, and asked him which one he'd take. And he said, "I'll have the gold." And I said, "Why?" He said, "This is gold, that's just paper."
That's good. That was fun.
Perfect line.
Yeah. So, guys, I think yeah, we're gonna call it a night or a day wherever you are, and I want to thank both of you, Clive and Francis, for coming on, and I apologize, Francis, for the misunderstanding. And yeah, and wish you all a great week, and also the viewers for being here. Without you guys, yeah, we wouldn't have this community. And like yeah, that's a good point you made, Francis, about trying to also get ahead of the narrative, especially with the bond story and the ECB gold story. Uh, any final words, guys, before we tune off?
Yeah, just be prepared. Don't leave your gold buying till the very last minute, because by when we get to the Francis said we're at 2 minutes to midnight. I've been saying 5 minutes to midnight, but people are now calling me a fool and saying, "What are you talking about, Clive? It's not five, it's two." And so I think, Francis, you're right. It's 2 minutes to midnight, and if you leave it to 1 minute to midnight, you won't be able to buy any gold.
Yeah, I think Clive's quite correct. And I also think money in the bank is only as good as banks are solvent, and a debt-based crisis where banks are originators of debt actually brings counterparty risk of the entire system into play. You add to that an escalation in war where someone could use an EMP, or, oh, we lost grid or power and this hack and that hack, narratives that have been preceded already are ones you should be worrying about. And just run the bank accounts fairly lean, run the cash balances at home a bit high, and definitely run the bullion balances higher still. And don't keep them in institutional grid or bank vaults as well as or as little as possible that you're not prepared to lose. And yeah, at the same time, enjoy life. Don't let
Yeah.
the doomers and the people that are don't live in fear. Get up, swim, ride, keep healthy, keep strong, keep enjoying life. Game theory, this, you were born for these times. If you want to follow our channel, please support Clive. He started out. It's a long road on YouTube. Go sub him. You're going to always get great value there. And you can join us as well on the Market Sniper. And occasionally we cover the status tokens that are probably going to win. Not that we love them, on the Crypto Sniper as well. We are the same on X under the same acronym. So the Crypto Sniper and the Market Sniper. And thanks for having us on, Mario.
You're welcome. And I would say as well, it's better to be early than one day late, right? So
Absolutely. Thank you
100%.
very much for having us on, Mario.
you're welcome. And thanks for coming on.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. All right.